What's going on, folks? Ted from Nerd Immersion here, and I wanted to talk to you about the Dungeons and Dragons Virtual Tabletop. We first learned about this in March at a D&D Direct, I think that was what it was called. And then I actually got to play around with it a little bit at the D&D Content Creator Summit. Now, we know that over the course of this year, there will be multiple beta tests or alpha tests or whatever the case may be. And I think the goal is that end of this year, D&D Beyond users, I don't know if it's going to be everybody or a select few or however that's going to work out, will be able to, I think, a closed beta. Again, rollout isn't sometime till next year, possibly even the following year based on feedback and things like that. But the reason that I'm bringing this up is that over the past week, I have had access to this. They did a closed, they're still calling it pre-alpha test. And I wanted to kind of give you my experience. Now, a couple of things. One, some of the stuff in there is under NDA. So consider that. The stuff that was under NDA, I can't show you anyway. But basically, I will say, given all of the sensitivity around the OGL and everything, the NDA was very specific. And it basically said, I cannot do the following. I cannot share recording, video or audio of any kind. I can't stream it. I can't do screen sharing, screenshots, or capture the gameplay in any way. I also can't share any files, assets, materials, blah, 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 for future projects. I don't really think that there was anything in there. It says, including but not limited to game keys, EXEs, game files, documentation, stuff like that. So I am allowed to talk about my entire experience, and I can say whatever I want in any way that I want. I'm not restricted that I can tell you if I liked it, I didn't like it. All that stuff is open. I just can't show you what was in it. Now, what I can tell you is if you go back and watch that D&D Direct, where they kind of showcase them in like a tavern, that's basically exactly what this playtest was, which was also exactly what I got to experience in the Content Creator Summit. So it's actually nothing new. It is still being touted as pre-alpha footage or pre-alpha build. So I'm curious how further along things have gotten since April, because we're 4 months later here. And presumably the build that we saw in March in that direct video is the same build that I just was playing in. Now, I will say it was handled a little strangely, in my opinion. Basically what happened is Wizards of the Coast reached out and said, hey, do you want to test this? They basically gave us almost a full week, like 2 weekends, essentially, I think. Basically an extended period of time, which was nice, especially for those of us who don't have a lot of free time, to not have to be like, hey, you have a couple of days. You had a pretty lengthy period of time to go in and play test it. Now, I had originally thought they had set up a Discord server for people that were playtesting it, and I thought, oh, okay, that's what we're going to do. We're going to go in there. People are going to say, this is my availability, and we're going to get to go in and test it and either play it or opt to run it or what have you. No, the Discord for the virtual tabletop was basically its sole purpose was just for like technical questions and to possibly see if when you're running a game, if you wanted to get somebody from the D&D team to kind of pop in and observe and answer any questions you might have. But that also requires you to possibly use Discord and talk about it there. But the thing that I thought was odd is they essentially sent me 6 codes to get the game and then 6 codes to access the pre-alpha build. Now, I'm the only one who signed the NDA, right? But the process is, hey, invite up to 5 other people to experience this, but tell them to be cool, basically, because I invite all these people, you know, I actually had 5 people that I invited into the virtual tabletop, and basically because I started the room, I was the DM, and I basically had access to the pre-scripted adventure that they had in there, which again was the same one that I had seen twice before, once in this direct, once in person at the Content Creator Summit. And then basically they were just going to be playing characters. But yeah, I mean, obviously I think if you were going to do this, you need to be smart about who you invite, right? I guess. But it also is odd that you could just invite anybody you want. And technically, they didn't sign anything that says that they can't screen capture, share, whatever they want to do, and release that to the public. Again, Hopefully, you have reputable people that you invite to this NDA related thing, but it also is odd that Wizards of the Coast didn't like say send us the codes of the people you invited so that we can then like send us the contact information before they accept it so that they can then sign an NDA as well. It was just handled kind of weird in my opinion, and I actually learned that from other people in the virtual tabletop server as well, that they felt it was a little weird. They weren't really sure how to go about it because of the fact that it was like invite people, but like you can't talk about it, but they're not held to anything. I don't know. Anyway, that's enough about the kind of lead up to it. And basically, I wasn't sure I was going to be able to it. I went in and played around a little bit myself on my own to just test out kind of some of the capabilities. And then basically on a random night, I just happened to ask my group that I usually play Destiny with, because we were gearing up for the Destiny showcase earlier this week. And I was like, hey, or I guess, was it this week? Yeah, it was this week. And then I was like, do you guys available? And then 5 people were. And I was like, cool, everybody jump in. Here's all the codes, blah, 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 blah. Got everybody in. And I was like, we're going to run through an adventure. I don't know how long it's going to take, but here's what happens. So we go in, and then there were, what I thought was weird, is there are 4 PC characters that have an associated D&D Beyond character sheet that's linked to it, and there were 4. They gave us 6 codes, 1 for the DM and 5 for players, but they only provided us with 4 player characters, which I thought was an oversight, in my opinion, but either way. And then there's a bunch of NPCs around. Now, one thing that I did find was a detriment is that it was very easy for any of the players to just click on an NPC and claim them, and then now they basically have control over that NPC. Now, I, as the DM, can right-click on that and say unclaim, and then it is no longer available for the players to use. But yeah, I didn't particularly enjoy that. However, I will say I was able to spawn in a miniature for the 5th player. I was able to go to D&D Beyond and create a real quick, like, randomly generated character, and then link that character to that miniature in the pre-alpha, and it worked just fine. Populated with all of the ability scores, skills, and all that stuff, and it dropped in. And that took me, as long as it said to generate a pre-created character in D&D Beyond, which I was very impressed with. I thought I was going to be stuck trying to like do this on the fly and give this character something so that it wasn't just like a random commoner with 10 stats across the board. So that actually worked out really well. So that worked out, and then we kind of just dove into the adventure. Now, again, I think it's close. It's got a lot of things working for it. The graphics were pretty well. The water looked really good. The ability to spawn in miniatures is nice. You can add stuff if you want to. The downside that I do think is a problem is that by default, players can spawn in miniatures. So they basically have the entire miniature catalog that's available in the game. And it's kind of like a similar thing to when you're playing in something like Roll20 and you don't untoggle the ability for people to draw on the map. And you like come into a map, you walk out to go get a drink or something, and then your players have just drawn penises all over the map because that's what players do. So I was like, hey, I'm going to go grab a cup of coffee. And then I came back and there were black dragons everywhere. One person made an entire horse army, and we're all inside this tavern, and it's just full of dragons and horses and whatever else. So then I have to right-click each one, or control-click each one, and then right-click delete so that we can actually get back to the adventure, but there's nothing stopping the players from doing that. Now, there may be reasons why behind the scenes that players are able to do that. Perhaps if they have summons, find familiar, or so on, that makes sense. Perhaps you can restrict it. That's not an option at this point. And again, I couldn't find, the option menu was very minimal, so I couldn't really find anything to allow me to toggle that off so players couldn't do that. So there's nothing stopping them from doing that as often as they wanted. We played through kind of the starter, the little tavern bit, which was fine. It had a lot of, it has some interesting features, right? So if you go, it's your turn, and you go to a turn-based mode, and you go to a turns, you have whatever your movement speed is, and it didn't have grids, but it did have, like, you would pick up your mini, and you could click and drag it and move it around, and it would tell you the extent of your movement. So, like, if you had a 30-foot movement speed, you'd pick up your mini and move it. When you hit 30 feet, it wouldn't let you move it any further. Now, there was nothing stopping you from just letting go of your mini, and it drops to the ground, and then just picking it up and moving it again, it would give you that 30 feet of movement constantly as long as you dropped it and reset it. Now, again, maybe I'm a little ruined from things like Baldur's Gate 3, but like I would move, drop it, and then I would say I'm going to activate dash as an action or a bonus action. However, I would do that in the virtual tabletop. And then, okay, now I can pick it up and move it another 30 feet. Because right now, you could essentially just pick up and move and you would have unlimited movement speed. Now, that would require a little bit of an honor system, but I feel like that's an easy thing to fix. I also did take a survey, which I'll get to in a little bit after the fact, that they sent out for feedback, and it did list off some potential future features, and I will go through what those were and what they kind of reference to see what your thoughts are. The other thing that we encountered is that you really can't access your entire, at least as far as I could tell, your entire D&D Beyond character sheet within the virtual tabletop itself. You have access to certain things like your ability scores. You can see what roles you're proficient in, saving throws, skills, and stuff like that. And you'll have like a small modicum of like your attack rolls. If you're a spellcaster, you'll also have a section that has spells, but several spells that we saw, both for attacks and abilities for enemies, as well as some spells for players, came up as not yet supported, so it wasn't really an option. We basically did our little tavern scene, and then we kind of roll out into the town itself as the tavern collapsed in on itself. It would be cool, and that's something that they alluded to in the survey, that like after you like end that part of the scene, that it changes the model of the tavern to be a collapsed tavern as opposed to just being exactly the same, just you're saying that it's collapsed. And then the adventure, in my opinion, was not, it was mostly there, but it wasn't well written, in my opinion. It basically had like 6 encounters and then a final encounter. So you have the tavern, 6 kind of not random encounters, but I don't know if the design plan was for it to be linear, like you do number 2, then you go to 3, then you go to 4, or it should be sandboxy and just all these things are here, pick where you want to go. But essentially, after the floor collapses in the tavern, the town is overrun with kobolds. You then realize that the rats that are gnawing, that they thought they heard in the walls, were actually kobolds undermining the tavern. And then it's like, okay, the first encounter is that the kobolds let out a bunch of horses, and it's like a animal handling check, try to calm the horses so that they don't like trample anybody. But there are no kobolds anywhere near the stable. And then it says, like, if nobody stops the horses in so many turns, a kobold will knock over a villager, and then the villager will get trampled by the horses as they run out of town. But there were no kobolds there to knock down the villagers, so, like, I wasn't sure how that was supposed to work. And there were a lot of things that were very close. Like, it mentions an NPC in, like, the little, you pop out, it has, like, a little window with all of the adventures, and it was tiered in, like, a heading structure, Act 1, encounter, and so on. And like when you click on an encounter, it moves your camera over to where that encounter is happening, which is really cool. But it doesn't do that for the players. It only does it for the DM. I think if I'm like, and over here, click, and then everybody's camera pans over to there, that would be cool to show them where the action is if you want to like make an announcement that something's happening. And then it'll say like, the NPC, whatever, and I'll have a little blue NPC logo and then the NPC's name. And I think if I click on that, one, it should take me to the NPC if I want to move them. But I also think there's a ping feature. I think it would be great that if you like double clicked it, that it pings where the NPC is on the map. So if I say, Barton Thumbo or whatever his name is, and I click it, it pings to him so people know who I'm talking about on the map. That seems like a pretty easy thing to do, and it would be a nice quality of life. Same thing with anybody still in the tavern needs to make a dexterity saving throw. I think I should be able to click where it has the little die symbol that I need a dex save, and then it prompts the screen, or maybe it even gives me an option to select the players, choose these people, prompts me, and then I can hit them and it says make a dex save, and then it pops up on their screen and they make the saving throw. Rather than me saying, okay, I need you all to make a dex save, and then everybody rolls it individually, it would be cool if it prompted it, and then also had filled it out, okay, I prompt it, and I'm going to say, okay, it's the whole party, all 5 players, dex save, and then everybody rolls their dex save, and it pulls up a list, maybe on a grayed out, again, I'm thinking Baldur's Gate 3 here, but dex save, across the screen, and it pulls up the 5 characters, and then all their dice roll, and then it sees bing, 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 you see the 5 people, pass, fail, whatever it is. So you can see that. The other players can see who pass fail, and then you as the DM also know, and then maybe it has an option to click roll the damage, and it rolls the damage, and then it auto fills it out for you, or it just auto applies it to the character, right? It says, hey, you failed, you take 3 points of damage. And then it just, it could have like an apply to player button. And hit that, and then it just hits them and their health bar lowers. Because as it stands, that's kind of how it is in the physical, tabletop, where if I say you take 3 points of damage, you track it yourself, and you would basically do that, move your health bar or make adjustments accordingly. But if you could do it automatically, I think that's pretty cool. Just to keep, speed things up and have the upkeep going. Same thing with like if I want to go to an encounter and it's like there are 6 kobolds here, I have to control click or individually click reveal on each kobold to have them appear. If I get to a point in the encounter and I click this and the camera shifts over to this encounter, there should be an option to just click in the text that says reveal all, and then all the kobolds appear. That's a simple thing. You're taking me to the encounter. I'm saying this is going to happen anyway. Let me just spawn in the encounter essentially by a click of a button within the adventure structure where it makes sense. So that was, again, like I said, it was close. It just needed a little bit of help moving along. Same thing with, like I said, the encounter structure. I couldn't tell if I was supposed to linearly move them from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 to all the way up to the third act, or just kind of let them go free. But also, how would they know to go to the church to find that a kobold is roasting somebody on a spit, which is also really dark, but that was a thing that was happening. And like there's a ghost over here in the cemetery, but I'm like, why would they even go over there? There was no prompt to get them to go there other than the fact that the adventure had that as an option. They didn't say like, oh, the NPCs in the town come over to you and say, hey, this is going on. Did you hear about this? Like, that's not there. I mean, again, you've been DMing for a while, you can make it happen. But in my opinion, it was close. It just needed that little push to kind of get it to be more of an adventure. Again, it is the adventure could be written perfectly fine. Has nothing to do with it being pre-alpha. So there were some issues there. I think that the adventure could use a little bit of touch-up. And then basically the final encounter, which again you can see in that D&D Direct, is an Ankeg bursts up out of the ground in the middle of town, and then the players fight the Ankeg. Now, what was really cool is when I revealed the Ankeg, it actually had its own animation where it like out of the ground and it makes like a roar sound, and that was awesome. But it's the only monster in the current thing that has an animation for its arrival and a sound effect. Now, playing around, we also did notice that all of the miniatures are static on the board. They don't move at all, except for the gelatinous cube. If you spawn in a gelatinous cube, it actually has like a static kind of idle animation where it like wiggles around a little bit. That was really cool. I don't know how hard that is to do to apply that for everything, but that would be a neat thing to have. What else? One thing was cool is when you attack. I liked a lot of the options. Like if I move over and I'm going to use a sword and attack a kobold, it will, with my sword, it will roll the die. Then it'll like have my character. It's almost like an old school like Pokemon animation where my guy's like, and he hits it. And then if I hit, what I liked is like it hits it, and then coming out the other side of it is the damage dice. So it's like, and it rolls the dice and then applies the damage. As the DM, I can see the numbers on every enemy's hit point bar. The players can't see I don't think they can see the entire health bar, but it does tell them when the enemies are bloodied, meaning that they're at less than half hit points. It shows that. And that was a really cool thing, and players really liked that. It was the same thing with like one of our wizards cast a magic missile at the Ankeg, so the missiles like they flew and they hit it, and then when they hit it, then the die popped out the other side, the D4 out the other side to roll. Same thing with like a burning hands. It had an animation of like a fire cone, and then the 3 dice would roll out the other side after they impacted. That was really cool. Everybody really enjoyed seeing that. Same thing with like arrows being shot to then see the damage roll out the other side. That was really neat. I really enjoyed that, and so did all of the players. So it was interesting though, like I said, that it was the exact same scenario that I had seen twice before. There was the opportunity to load your own maps, However, the only option they had as far as the map builder go, at least as far as I saw, was a 2D top-down kind of grid or non-grid map building thing. It didn't have like the option to build like terrain, because this is like a village with houses and mountains and stuff like that, and you didn't have the opportunity to really build any of that. So if that was there, that would be really interesting. So you could really like just play around and try to see how you could craft something. And I would have spent time in there, maybe even run my own adventure. But like I said, the adventure needed help. Some of the options needed to be disallowed for players to be able to do. And then, this is probably one of the worst things, is the Ankh-Egg, right? Everybody knows an Ankh-Egg is like a big underground ant burrowing creature. But one of its cool, unique abilities is it has an acid spray that it does. Well, the acid spray ability was not supported, so I couldn't actually like do a cool like psh, acid spray animation. It just wasn't an option. I could roll 3d6 acid damage, but I couldn't actually like have the cool animation on screen. Speaking of also animations on screen, if you take a creature down to 0 hit points, there's no animation, there's no fanfare, and then it's just basically on the DM to delete the mini off the field. It would be cool that if you defeat something, there's like a blood splatter effect, or like the miniature just gets toppled over so that you know that it's dead. Like maybe you still want to keep it there to mark the field for whatever reason, for looting or for necromancy purposes or what have you. But like it just like gets knocked over. That would be neat. Some sort of fanfare for rolling a natural 20, like even if it's just like stars appear on the screen, that would be neat. You could also do the same thing with natural ones if you wanted to have like a sound effect. Sound effect would probably be the easiest. Also, I would love to see customizable dice colors. It was all just this kind of like marbled purple and gold kind of color die. I would like to have the opportunity. That may be a future thing, potentially a microtransaction thing, kind of like you have on D&D Beyond, where you can buy dice of different colors. I don't know. That would be something I'd like to see. Not microtransactions, just different color dice options. Again, it's a simple thing we have in Baldur's Gate 3, but it's nice to have different colors. So if you want to choose a different die, instead of rolling purple or collector's edition dice, now you have blue, right? Little things. So all in all, like I said, it was interesting to see. Still a little worried that it's the same build that we have seen. But everybody, so some of the players that I had are D&D vets. They've been playing for a long time. I've played with them for a long time. Some are kind of like D&D casual, if you will. But everybody in the group was video gamers, and everybody picked it up very easily. So for what it's worth in that aspect, picking it up and it kind of having the concept of replicating a D&D table, but also kind of being a video game at the same time, it kind of did both. It doesn't have, or at least it didn't have, an integrated video or audio kind of interface for you to talk to other players as well as to see other players, right? That's obviously an integral part of any D&D campaign, I think, is having the ability to see your players. You could do all sorts of cool things where it's their turn and it pans to them, like camera-wise. I don't know. But like I said, it's functional, right? You can run that adventure. It has some issues in and of itself, but it's everybody that I talked to that was on the call with me said that they were interested in seeing where it goes because it did a good enough job to get them at least intrigued to see what the final product looks like. And as I said, lastly, there was a survey after the fact. And the survey basically had like what kind, as like a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being a low interest, 5 being a high interest, and then there was also a don't know, not sure option of how interested or would you be in like these new potential features. One was prop spawning, the ability to drag in your own objects. So that would be cool, pull in your own objects. Snap to grid and square movement, like I said, it had kind of like a tether. To me, snap to grid isn't important, but for some people who are very tactically minded, it might be. Party menu for the DM to see all the player stats at once. That would be huge. As it stood right now, you have to click on each figure to pull up their character's abilities. So I would like to be able to just have like a party menu, and then you can see what the hit points are, if you want to, conditions and stuff. Player inventory management, I think, would be huge. It's something that I think D&D Beyond was working on for a long time and they never finished, was like a shared inventory as well. If you have like a bag of holding, like here's what the shared resources are. Party could access that. That would be nice. Fog of War. I don't love Fog of War, but I also understand its necessity in some areas. Like, especially if you're in like a dungeon, you can just top down and see what's in the next room. Fog of War would be helpful. It didn't have it here, but I think it could definitely be a useful tool. Ability to select, cut, and paste multiple miniatures. That's a no-brainer. You need that. More rules automation. Example, calculating stats depending on active spells or worn equipment. Yeah, we talked about how like some of that was pre-calculated. The more auto calculation, the easier I think the experience will be. Again, not that you want to make D&D like a video game, but if you're doing this, anything you can do. The reason I say this is because it's not every table, right? Every group is different. But depending on the group you have, it can be very easy for them to check out of a virtual game if they don't feel like they're actively being engaged in it. So if you have something that will automate things to speed things along, to keep things moving and keep players interested, that could potentially help facilitate the virtual space a little bit easier or more so. Cinematic camera movements during attacks and special actions. Yeah, obviously it was like I was talking about how it would be cool to have like, an effect, but like if the camera moves like when you're like casting the spell, that'd be neat. Interaction points for players to read text, open doors, and get items. Yeah, I mean, if you want to take the time as the DM to put in doors that the players can interact with that will open up, that possibly will remove Fog of War, or put a sign that a player can click on and read. Again, that's a very more video gamey, but I don't see why you wouldn't do it. If you're going to put it in there, the option for the player to click on the sign and say, "Oh, it says Baldur's Gate's this way," right? But there's a potential to take that even a step further, depending, right? This is, again, a lot to ask for, but languages, right? There's a sign, and it's written in Draconic, and I go up and click on the sign, and it pops up on my screen, and it's all Draconic runes, and I can't read it. But you have Draconic as a language. When you click on it, it's translated and tells you what it says. That would be pretty neat. Ability for the DM to ask the players for a specific roll through the menu. Yeah, that's exactly what I was talking about, how I thought it would be really useful if I could prompt a dexterity saving throw inside the game, as opposed to having to just say roll a dexterity saving throw. I can hit you with a prompt. A couple other ones were the ability to chat or send emotes inside the client. I think a chat could be good, especially, I mean, people are going to be using some sort of VoIP, I imagine, but emotes, if your minis could emote, people would love that. Automated cover and vision system. Example, step behind a wall to get a bonus. Map only shows what a character can see. This is like the concept of like dynamic lighting and cover mechanics. This would be great. It would add a lot to it. Again, it helps make it more like a video game, but I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing. Environments change because of story, like a version of the inn that is collapsed. I already talked about that. That would be cool, right? You just hit a button inside the adventure and it changes the inn from what you had to a collapsed version of the inn, so now it looks different and it dynamically changes the battlefield. Animations on miniatures. Again, we mentioned the gelatinous cube had like a little wiggle animation, whereas I mean, everybody does like the create your select your character, where everybody's kind of moving back and forth, and then they do a thing, and then they go back to their idle animation. That would be neat. More impactful visuals and sound effects. Again, we talked about mechanics for different spells or features, as well as things like death animations. Rules lookup inside the Unreal client. That could be big, right? Be able to pull up a rule, have the whole book there. And then drawing tools, draw lines on the environment to show information. I didn't think about that, but that could be cool. Like, hey, you're going to go over here, or like you could just very quickly scribble something down if you don't have time to like cinematically build a wall or what have you. Like, there's a wall of fire here. I mean, that might be easy if they just have a fire asset you can just drag, but you get the point. I don't think that's huge for me, the ability to draw, but it could be useful for other folks for sure. The only other thing that I had said in some of like the fill out your own sections of the survey were, I don't want this to turn into microtransaction hell. I'm okay with microtransactions for cosmetics, right? You want to have your character's sword light up orange? Fine. You want to spend $1 on that? Go for it. Whatever. As long as it doesn't fundamentally impact the game, right? I don't want you to be able to spend $5 to get a +5 bonus on your sword forever, so now you're just better at the game because you spent real-world money. I think buying asset packs potentially, as long as they're reasonably priced for different assets in the game for building within the virtual tabletop, I'm fine with that. I also don't want to have to buy my books and adventures and things for a fourth time. If I buy it on D&D Beyond, I'd like to also have a version of it in the virtual tabletop. Now, maybe they don't come out at the same time. Maybe you get the D&D Beyond version the day it launches, and then 3 weeks later it rolls out in virtual tabletop form or what have you. But I don't have to buy it again. Or if I want to just buy it in the virtual tabletop, maybe I get a complimentary version of it on D&D Beyond for free, or however that would work. Again, I realize this is kind of a 30-minute me rambling video, and I can't show you visuals. Otherwise, I gladly would. But I can't because that's part of the NDA behind this. But it has promise as it stands. We also don't know what the final price would be. We don't know. I had no issues. My computer's a little bit older. My computer is over 5 years old, right? It's a 1080. What is this? The hell kind of graphics card is it? I don't remember. But it's, it's a. I don't remember. But you know what? I'll look it up while we're talking. But it's an older graphics card, but I was able to run it. It is run in Unreal Engine. We had folks from all over the world. We had folks in England, all over the States, with a varying degree of internet bandwidth, as well as computer specs, and nobody had any issues running the computer. We didn't have really any crashes or anything, or like bugs or stuttering or dropped frames. The only thing I did notice that was kind of wonky was it had a depth of field option, which so like when you're far out, like it would blur things, and it just didn't work in my opinion. It didn't look good. So I took off unchecked depth of field, and that seemed to make all the difference in, allowing things to be able to, see what I needed to see. Mine's a GTX 1080 Ti. So it was the top of the line graphics card, 5-6 years ago. And I had no issues running it. And again, I can't speak to everybody else's specs, but we had different specs and different internet speeds. And everybody was able to get things just fine. So, there was conversations that we'd heard, from the summit and all these other things, that it should be runnable on a phone or a tablet. That I don't know about. And honestly, I didn't think about it, but I probably could have attempted to download it on a tablet or on a cell phone. And I'm kind of kicking myself for not attempting to do that, to see if I downloaded it on a tablet, could I run it and would it actually work? If I get into another version of this, I think it might have been desktop only anyway. But if I get another version of it and I'm allowed to try it out on a tablet or a phone, I will gladly do so to see if it actually works or if it just chugs along. I don't know. But yeah, like I said, the adventure is mostly there. It needs a little bit of touch-ups in the way things go, a little bit more descriptive text. The adventure could prompt more of the encounters better, I think. The assets are there. There was not a lot of assets for monsters. There was a fair amount, but not the entire monster manual for sure. So, like I said, I'm reserving judgment. We also don't know what kind of price tag we're looking at for this thing, right? Is this going to be a monthly subscription fee? Is this going to be a once-a-year subscription? Is this going to be a lifetime thing? How is this going to work? That'll definitely also help determine how interested I am, and probably you are, in the final product of this. Also, they had said any game that uses dice should be able to be run in the virtual tabletop. So, I mean, you wouldn't necessarily have direct character import like you have from D&D Beyond. But you could, in theory, build out, if you wanted to use this for something like Tales of the Valiant or Pathfinder, there's a potential way you might be able to still use it to do that. I know that's obviously not its intention, but there's a potential that may be an option for you as well. So anyway, I know this is kind of a rambly video, but if you made it to the end, thank you. I appreciate you. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.